come from another city. I'm not from Mexico City. And there you have a paradigm that the more concrete you have, like concrete, the material, the more it's more developed. So you want to see everything paved. Here in Mexico City, there is a lot of space still, and you can see this how you got this space where basically the government was like, have it, and don't worry about electricity and water.
This space that's called Huerto Romita. It's an urban garden and demonstration site for teaching people how to grow food in small spaces. This is one of the vertical gardens we have with very, very, very simple, low-tech materials. We have rebar, PVC, black plastic. It's filled with mostly worm compost and a little bit of black soil. And in the space where we would grow one lettuce, we're growing, I believe there's about 25 or 30 lettuces. And this will cost you about 200 pesos, $15 at the most. And you can make it yourself. In 2 hours, we made this beautiful vertical garden here. So small scale, household, very feasible vertical garden to grow. Here, this is our square foot garden. Square foot gardening has been really popular in US and other countries. There are many charts that help you to identify how many of a certain crop fits in a square foot. So for example, we have 4 lettuces or 1 basil, 4 green beans or 9 beets. And for example, I said green beans, but these are actually purple wax beans. In addition to growing different kinds of crops, we're looking to grow different varieties of crops that are lesser known. Food can be more exciting to eat when there's a purple wax bean. It's much more exciting than a green bean for kids, for example. This is an herb spiral. This is our inspirational piece on permaculture design principles that we follow a bunch here. There's about 10 different herbs planted in this spiral, and the idea is to create microclimates in a small area. So sun-loving plants and shade-loving plants can coexist in a small space. We've been trying out different models of how to grow food vertically. Vertical clay structure is pre-made. It has a very rustic watering system. There's a water reservoir on the bottom. You get a cup of water, you pour it up here, and it waters your whole vertical garden. We have herbs growing right now. Herbs are also good warrior plants for urban gardens. We have a rainwater catchment system that catches the water off of roof that covers half of our land. And this first tube is our first flush. There is a styrofoam ball inside here. So the first rainwater will fall into this tube. The ball floats up, eventually gets caught right here, stops the flow of the dirty first rain, and then the rest of the cleaner water falls directly into our tanks. And one good rainfall during the rainy season fills up 600 liters of storage area in these barrels. We have a gray water recycling system. You wash your hands in the sink and the water is collected into a bucket, and we empty that bucket into here. These aquatic plants help purify the water. There's a sedimentation filtration that goes on inside our tub, and we open up here. Clean water comes out. It's water that we use to also water our garden. When we talk about urban gardening in Mexico City, you have to talk about water. Water efficient containers. We have self-watering containers, different ways of making sure that limited water doesn't become a problem for growing food in the city. They're quite heavy. These boxes are quite common in Mexico. They're called chicken boxes because it's what commercial chicken comes in when it arrives to the marketplace. We use it as a perfect worm bin. We recycle, reuse newspaper as our bedding. And inside you can see there's a bunch of red wiggler worms in there. All the black material that you see is the worm castings. There's probably about 20,000 worms in this garden, and if you turn that into money, it's more money than any of our neighbors could imagine is in this little space that just looks like hippies growing plants. This is It's called a barrio. It's a much smaller part of the neighborhood. Many people who are currently in the hip part of the neighborhood, and there's all these bars and galleries and etc., have no idea that this block exists. This church is from 1514. It's one of the oldest churches in Mexico City. So there's definitely much more of a feel of the traditional Mexico. Here in the neighborhood, their interest in agriculture is not because it's hip and they want their roof and organic food. It's because really they need food to eat. This is our example of our hydroponics installation, and honestly we have not done anything to it, probably in about 2 months. We have not re-fed it with more nutrient solution. We're just seeing what happens. And for me, it's an example of how nature will grow even with not so much attention. We're growing Swiss chard. Swiss chard is one of my favorite crops because it requires low light. You can ignore it for a couple weeks. It's kind of these warrior crops to be had in an urban garden. 4 years ago, after a year of working here, everybody asked for hydroponics. Last week, we said, why do we have something if we don't believe in the message that it's giving? We don't want to use chemical agriculture. We don't want to be connected to the electricity to grow our lettuces. Why do we have it? And so we decided it's coming down, and we are going to use that space to try out green walls that we've been asked for a lot. So I believe this is our pretty full bin. It's warm. It's a sign that compost is happening there. Growing your own food is not something new. I think we've forgotten what the importance is of growing your own food.
A friend of mine sent me research that suggests that if you live in an environment where you have anything that resembles anything natural, like a picture of a whale, right? You're gonna be happier. Your well-being will increase. If you paint a wall green, it's much likely that you're gonna be happier. Well, what happens when you actually start growing plants?